From royal banquets featuring roast peacocks served in their own feathers, to kings who died mid-feast, to a monarch who once banned his own chefs for touching his pies. This is every British monarch's favourite food, and trust me, it's a lot more than tea and crumpets, because when you rule an empire, your appetite gets complicated. Some of these monarchs gorged like warlords, others ate like picky toddlers, and one queen was so obsessed with curry, she basically invented British Indian takeaway. But here's the thing about royal food. It wasn't just about eating. It was about power, status, legacy. Every meal was a political statement. Every dish was a flex. And every banquet, a chance to remind everyone who's boss. So, grab a fork, tuck in your napkin, and let's take a bite out of royal history, from Norman conquests to Windsor jelly molds. We're talking 1,000 years of monarchs who ate like nobody was watching, except everyone was watching. Because that was kind of the point. Let's kick things off with a king whose dinner killed him. King Henry I, son of William the Conqueror, had a thing for exotic food. But one night in 1135, he went too far. He sat down to a massive feast in Normandy and reportedly ate an excessive quantity of lampreys, slimy, eel-like jawless fish that looked like a medieval horror movie. These things don't even have jaws. They just latch onto other fish with circular rows of teeth and suck the life out of them. Nightmare fuel. But Henry? He thought they were delicious. His doctors told him not to. They warned him, "Your Majesty, maybe skip the lampreys tonight." But Henry, being Henry, said, "Whatever, I'm the king." Spoiler alert, he died shortly after, of food poisoning, caused by lamprey overdose. Historians debate whether it was the lampreys themselves or just bad preparation. Maybe they weren't cooked properly. Maybe they'd gone off. But either way, Henry ate them, got violently ill, and never recovered. That's right. Our story starts with death by fish vampire. And honestly, it sets the tone perfectly, because royal dining wasn't just dangerous for the peasants who had to catch and cook this stuff. Sometimes it was dangerous for the kings themselves. And if you thought lamprey was weird, wait till you hear about the warrior king who ate like a monk. You'd think King Richard the Lionheart warrior king, Crusader, the guy who basically spent his entire reign fighting overseas, ate like a beast. Like, you'd imagine him tearing into massive hunks of meat with his bare hands, chugging ale, the whole medieval warrior thing. But turns out, Richard preferred simple, light food. While his soldiers were chomping on whatever trench rations they could find, stale bread, dried meat, questionable stew, King Richard often fasted for religious reasons and dined on bread, olives, and wine. Basically, medieval keto. One historian even claimed Richard liked his food nourishing but not indulgent, which honestly sounds like something a wellness influencer would say today. Keep it clean, keep it light, keep it spiritual. Richard saw food as fuel, not entertainment. He was too busy conquering the Holy Land to worry about fancy feasts, which is ironic because his dad, King Henry II, ate like a wild boar. Speaking of which, King Henry II didn't just rule England. He ruled the dinner table, and by ruled, I mean terrorized. This man hated table manners, ate with his hands, talked with his mouth full, and once banned his court from laughing too loudly at dinner unless he started it, because apparently, even laughter needed royal approval. His favorite? Game meat, especially boar, venison, and wildfowl, roasted with spicy medieval sauces. We're talking heavy, greasy, intensely flavored dishes that would make your modern stomach revolt. But what really set him off? Overcooked food. It's said that if a servant brought him a dish that wasn't hot enough, Henry would hurl the plate across the hall. Just boom, plate shattered, gravy everywhere, chef crying in the corner. Historians describe him as having a volcanic temper, and apparently that extended to his meals. If the meat was dry, if the sauce was cold, if the wine wasn't the right temperature, someone was getting yelled at. Or worse. Gordon Ramsay, meet your spiritual ancestor. Honestly, if Henry II were alive today, he'd have his own cooking show. What is this? It's cold. You call yourself a royal chef? Now, if Henry II had anger issues with food, his descendant had storage issues. King John, yes, the Magna Carta guy, the one who got strong-armed into limiting his own power, was a wine hoarder. And I don't mean he liked a nice glass with dinner. I mean, he had massive royal cellars stocked with barrels of Bordeaux and claret. One record shows he ordered nearly 20,000 liters of wine in a single year. To put that in perspective, that's about 26,000 bottles for one person. Well, technically, for his court, but still, John was drinking like prohibition was coming. As for food, mostly meat-heavy dishes, lamb, duck, beef pies, and he absolutely despised greens. No vegetables, no salads, nothing remotely healthy. One chronicler noted that his court was known for its gluttony and waste. They'd serve massive portions, eat half, and toss the rest, which, considering the peasants outside were literally starving, was not a great look. Not surprising, for a king so unpopular, even his own barons tried to starve him into submission. They literally signed a document saying, "You have too much power, and also, you're kind of awful." And honestly, fair. But then came a king who took things in a completely different direction, a softer, sweeter one. King Edward II wasn't a power player like his dad. He was, well, different. He loved milk-based dishes, fruits, honeyed desserts, and occasionally snuck out of the palace to dine with commoners, which was considered wildly scandalous at the time. Like, imagine the King of England just showing up at your house like, "Hey, what's for dinner?" Absolute chaos. His personal pantry stocked with fresh cream, butter, and strawberries. Medieval strawberries, mind you, tiny, sour, and wildly inconsistent, not like the huge sweet ones we have today. These were basically fancy weeds. He also once spent a fortune on sweet wines imported from Greece. We're talking expensive, rare, I had this shipped across Europe kind of wine. Wine, dairy, dessert, basically a royal toddler's diet. Edward's eating habits reflected his personality. He wasn't interested in the traditional tough king image. He liked comfort, sweetness, softness, which, unfortunately for him, didn't go over well in medieval England, where kings were expected to be warriors. His reign ended badly. Let's just leave it at that. Fast forward a bit, and we get the king who basically invented food porn. If you want to thank someone for fancy British cuisine, blame King Richard II. This man was obsessed with presentation. Not just the food tastes good. No, it had to look like art. We're talking golden goblets encrusted with jewels, spices imported from the Far East, and food sculpted into swans, hedgehogs, and literal castles. Yes, castles. Made of food. His court produced one of the first ever English cookbooks, The Form of Cury, which included recipes like roasted whale. Yes, whale! Apparently, it was considered a delicacy. Peacock with gilded feathers. They'd roast the peacock, then stick its feathers back on so it looked alive, because nothing says delicious like a dead bird pretending to be alive. Almond milk stews with saffron. Actually, this one sounds kind of good. Richard's banquets weren't just meals, they were performances. Entire theatrical productions. Dishes were brought out with fanfare, musicians played, jesters entertained. It was basically medieval dinner theater. He basically invented Instagram food 600 years before Instagram. If Richard II had a smartphone, his feed would be insufferable. #blessed, #royal eats, #peacock goals. But all that pales in comparison to the ultimate royal glutton. You knew he was coming. Henry VIII didn't eat. He conquered meals. This man routinely consumed 4,000, 5,000 calories a day. To put that in perspective, the average person needs about 2,000. Henry was eating double every single day. His meals included multiple roasted meats, chicken, beef, pork, lamb, sometimes all at once, spiced pies, wine, ale, and a daily supply of marchpane, which is almond candy shaped like animals, castles, and yes, himself. Imagine eating a candy version of your own face. That's Henry VIII energy. He banned forks, believed eating with hands was manlier, and had separate kitchens for meats, fish, pastries, and sauces, each staffed with dozens of chefs. His kitchens were massive operations, employing hundreds of people just to keep the king fed. But his obsession, swan, only royals were allowed to eat it. Commoners caught eating swan could be punished. and Henry devoured them roasted, stuffed with herbs, and served with rich wine sauces. And let's not forget, he also banned his chefs from touching his pies, because only the king could break the crust. He was very particular about this. The pie had to come to the table intact, and Henry would ceremonially crack it open himself. Control issues? Maybe. But honestly, after 6 wives, we're not surprised. By the end of his life, Henry weighed an estimated 400 pounds and had to be carried around in a special chair. His eating habits literally reshaped his body and British cuisine. And then there was his daughter, who took excess to a whole new level, literally rotting from the inside out. Queen Elizabeth, she loved food that sparkled. Literally. Her favorite treat? Sugar-coated everything. Candied violets. Sugar-dusted marchpane. Even sugar-dipped chicken skin. Yes, chicken skin. Covered in sugar. I have questions. See, sugar had just become widely available in England during Elizabeth's reign, and it was expensive, exotic, and a total status symbol. Only the rich could afford it, so naturally, Elizabeth went all in. The Queen had such a sweet tooth, her teeth blackened, and rotted a look that actually became fashionable among the nobility. People started painting their teeth black to look like the Queen, because apparently, tooth decay was trendy. Also on her menu, swan, pigeon pie, and salmon with saffron. But nothing beat sugar sculptures, molded into crowns, dragons, and royal symbols. Elizabeth's banquets featured entire centerpieces made of sugar, edible art, which sounds cool until you remember that sugar was also causing her teeth to literally fall out. She was basically living in the world's most deadly dessert buffet. But here's the thing, Elizabeth knew how to use food politically. She'd host elaborate banquets for foreign dignitaries, showing off England's wealth and power through sheer culinary excess. Every dish was a message. We're rich. We're powerful. Don't mess with us. After Elizabeth came a king who trusted no one, especially his cooks. King James I had trust issues. Big ones. He feared being poisoned constantly, so he refused most cooked dishes unless prepared by a small, trusted circle of chefs. And even then, he was suspicious. His go-to? Smoked meats, preserved fish, and a lot of dried fruits. Basically, anything that couldn't easily be tampered with. Smoked meat? Hard to poison. Dried fruit? Same deal. Fresh, elaborately prepared dishes? Absolutely not. Too risky. Also, he hated garlic, loathed it, thought it smelled terrible, and made people's breath unbearable. Which, fair, but also, garlic is delicious. He also loathed raw veggies and drank wine diluted with water, like a Roman senator with IBS. James was so paranoid about poison that he employed official food tasters, people whose literal job was to eat his food first and make sure they didn't die. Imagine that job interview. So, what do you do? Oh, I risk my life every meal to make sure the king doesn't get murdered by soup. His fear wasn't entirely unfounded. Poisoning was a legitimate assassination method back then. But James took it to the extreme. He basically ate like someone on a witness protection diet. Then along came his grandson, who decided it was time to party. After years in exile, King Charles II came back, ready to party. And by party, I mean revolutionize British cuisine. He introduced hot chocolate to the royal court and became obsessed. But this wasn't hot cocoa like we know it today. This was thick, molten chocolate served as a drink, laced with sugar and spices like cinnamon and chili. It came from Spain, which had gotten it from the Aztecs, and Charles brought it to England like, "You've been drinking boring tea this whole time? Try this." He also brought in French cuisine, hired French chefs, and threw breakfast parties at midnight. Yes, midnight. Because why eat breakfast at a normal time when you're the king? His favorite food? Oysters, pastries, and spiced meats, especially those served by his many mistresses. Charles had at least 12 acknowledged illegitimate children, and food played a big role in his romantic life. He'd host intimate dinners, serve exotic dishes, seduce everyone in sight. It was all very scandalous and very French. His court was known for its hedonism, and food was at the center of it all. After years of Puritan rule under Cromwell, when England was basically a joyless, flavorless wasteland, Charles brought back indulgence. And, honestly, England needed it. Jump ahead a few decades, and we meet the king who pickled everything. King George loved German food. Naturally, he was from Hanover, Germany, and never really adapted to British cuisine. But he also became known for his obsession with pickles, pickled herring, pickled cabbage, pickled everything. Royal banquets included barrels of sauerkraut, and his personal kitchen imported sour beer from Hanover. He basically turned the royal court into a German beer hall. He once demanded a pickled eel pie. The chef took one look at the request and resigned, just walked out. I trained in France for this? King George never learned English, barely engaged with British culture, and spent as much time as possible back in Germany. His food choices reflected that he wanted German comfort food, British cuisine, be damned, which didn't exactly endear him to his subjects. But hey, the man liked what he liked. His great-grandson? Total opposite. Simple tastes for troubled times. King George III, the Mad King, had surprisingly basic tastes. He adored fruit pies, especially blueberry and apple. Simple, homemade, unpretentious. He insisted on simple, home-cooked meals, even as royal feasts continued around him. While his court dined on elaborate multi-course banquets, George often requested just a slice of pie and a cup of tea. He found comfort in simplicity. During his bouts of illness, he suffered from what historians now believe was porphyria, a blood disorder that caused mental instability. Records show he was fed gruel and bread soaked in wine. A sad diet for a king unraveling. But give him a pie, a moment of clarity, and he was, briefly, back in control. George's relationship with food mirrored his reign, marked by moments of stability, interrupted by chaos. His simple tastes were a refuge, a small piece of normalcy in an increasingly unstable life. Now let's talk about the Queen who changed British food forever. Queen Victoria changed the game. She ruled an empire that spanned a quarter of the globe, and her table reflected it. British cuisine stopped being just British. It became a fusion of cultures, flavors, and ingredients from across the empire. After taking on Indian servants, most notably Abdul Karim, her trusted munshi, her menus began to feature chicken, curry, dal, and mango chutney, served right alongside roast beef and Yorkshire puddings. Can you imagine? A royal banquet with curry and roast beef on the same table. It was revolutionary. Victoria loved Indian food so much that she had her chefs trained in Indian cooking techniques. She requested curry multiple times a week. She basically kick-started Britain's obsession with Indian takeaway, a legacy that continues today. She also loved scones. Afternoon tea became a full cultural institution under her reign. Victoria sponge cake? Literally named after her. She loved it so much, it became her signature dessert. And then there was turtle soup, wildly expensive, utterly bizarre, and weirdly popular among Victorian elites. They'd import live turtles, butcher them, and make soup. It was considered the height of luxury. Queen Victoria's food legacy? The blend of colonial fusion and English tea time with just a hint of imperial arrogance. She took foods from conquered lands and made them fashionable in Britain, forever altering what British cuisine even meant. And then came her son, who took royal excess to Olympic levels. Before he was king, King Edward was already a legend for eating. This man once attended a dinner with 10 full courses and ate everything, every single course. His breakfast? Dozens of eggs, cold cuts, smoked fish, toast, pastries, and champagne. Yes, champagne for breakfast. Because apparently, orange juice wasn't fancy enough. He imported chefs from Paris, built new kitchens at every royal residence, and created the Edwardian banquet style, opulent, excessive, and never-ending. Edward's meals could last hours, multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Soup, fish, meat, game, dessert, cheese, fruit, petite fours. It just kept coming. One record shows he gained almost 80 pounds in 10 years. Royal metabolism equals not a thing. Edward was also known for hosting extravagant parties, where food was the main attraction. He'd invite Europe's elite, serve them the finest cuisine, and basically flex on everyone. But his eating habits took a toll. By the time he became king, He was significantly overweight, suffered from various health issues, and died relatively young at 68. Turns out, eating like that for decades catches up with you. After all that excess, the next generation went back to basics. King George VI was famously shy, and so was his stomach. He loved kippers, toast, and black tea. That was breakfast. Simple, consistent, unpretentious. For lunch, often just cold meats and salad. Dinner, soup, and a small roast. Nothing fancy. After the excess of his predecessors, especially his father and grandfather, King George VI's meals were shockingly modest. But it was fitting for a king who led Britain through war and rationing. During World War II, George and his family followed the same rationing rules as ordinary citizens. They ate the same limited portions, the same basic foods. It was a PR move, sure, but also genuine. George wasn't interested in opulence. He wanted to be a king his people could relate to, especially during the hardest years of the 20th century. His simple tastes reflected his character: steady, reliable, unpretentious. He was a king who chose duty over indulgence, and his food choices reflected that. And his daughter? She perfected the art of royal discipline even at the dinner table. The late Queen Elizabeth II had a strict palate, and by strict, I mean regimented to the point of obsession. Every day started with cereal in a plastic container. Yes, Tupperware poured by hand, served with English breakfast tea. The same breakfast, every single day. Lunch was grilled fish or chicken, vegetables, and no starches, unless on special occasions. Dinner followed a similar pattern: simple, grilled, no heavy sauces. But her weakness? Chocolate biscuit cake. She loved it so much that a slice traveled with her wherever she went. If there was leftover cake from tea, it would be wrapped up and served again the next day. Waste not, want not. She also had a daily Dubonnet and gin cocktail before lunch. Every day, without fail. Some reports say she had two. Also, she hated garlic. Banned it from royal menus. Forever. No exceptions. If you were cooking for the Queen, no garlic. End of story. Elizabeth's approach to food was about control. She controlled what she ate, when she ate, and how much. It was discipline, consistency, and order qualities that defined her entire reign. Which brings us to today's king, who's basically a royal hippie farmer. And finally, the current monarch, King Charles III. A lifelong organic foodie, King Charles banned foie gras from royal menus decades ago, citing animal cruelty. He prefers seasonal vegetables, wild mushrooms foraged from his own estates, and free-range eggs from his own farm. He's been ahead of the organic, sustainable food movement for years. Before it was trendy, Charles was advocating for organic farming, criticizing industrial agriculture, and championing local food systems. He even travels with his own breakfast box, which includes 6 varieties of honey, a boiled egg timer, and special muesli. Yes, the King of England travels with his own muesli, eco-conscious, but extremely particular. He's like a farmer, who also happens to be king. Charles has also been vocal about food waste, sustainability, and ethical sourcing. He's turned royal estates into working organic farms, and his Duchy Originals brand sells organic products. He's basically the anti-Henry VIII. Where Henry gorged, Charles moderates. Where Henry indulged, Charles restrains. It's a whole different era of royal eating. So, there you have it. From fish that killed kings, to swans fit for tyrants, to curry that built empires, to organic muesli fit for a modern monarch, British monarchs have always dined like nobody else. Because in the world of royalty, you are what you eat, and sometimes what you eat gets you killed, immortalized, or worshipped. Food wasn't just sustenance for these monarchs, it was power, politics, and personality, all wrapped up in a single meal. And if you thought this was mad, just wait until you hear what they were buried with. Spoiler: one king was literally found under a car park. Click here for that story. Or I swear, I'm banning forks again. Subscribe to Agent Crown, because monarchy never tasted this weird.